Recently, George Janko had Ruslan, who is a Christian YouTuber, on his podcast, and they talked about many different things. But towards the end of this podcast, Ruslan presses George on a couple topics, and one of those was him not attending a local body church. Now, in today's video, we're actually going to dive into the reasoning and see why George Janko does not go to church on Sundays, his issues with the local body, and we're going to see Ruslan correct him as well on this, as well as we're going to dive into the one another's in Scripture that make it abundantly clear for us as believers to get plugged into our local body. Now, with that being said, let's see why George Janko decides church is just not for him.
Mentorship in a local church context.
Got
like
it.
a church you
So
guys are
I have a hard
connected
time
to.
with church. This might be a whole different like conversation.
Sure.
I think it's maybe because I have past relationships with corrupted churches, like from the one I went to, or the new ones I come here. I truly haven't walked into a place where I'm like, they've figured it out. And maybe that's my issue, but like the certain realms, like they come with such respect for God. Mm-hmm. They're not chewing gum. They're dressed appropriately. There's respect and fear, but they choose different things that I wouldn't choose because Christ says don't do that. And then I go over here, they're doing a lot of the things that God says, hey, you should do. And I'm wishing that my people would do that. But then they're chewing gum, they're swearing, they're joking around in church. And I'm like, yo, dog, you're in God's house right now. The fact that you guys are not shaking from his presence is like freaking me out. So I can't be here either. Yeah. So it's like I'm trying to find a home that has the fear of God and the respect of God, but also doesn't dilute the word of God. Absolutely. And so I'm just on the hunt for that.
So as we can see, George is making it clear the reason why he doesn't find himself in a local body, why he's not a member of a church, is because he's been, affected in a negative way by the church in his past, as well as the churches that he kind of would attend nowadays seem to be lacking heavily in this kind of reverence, fear of the Lord, because they go into the church, they go into the building and they're swearing still, they're chewing gum, they're dressed a certain way, which I find kind of interesting that George is making this comment, considering George still cusses. George does not attend a local body. George is still having sex with his fiance. There are issues here because it's almost like we have to put on a face, is what seems like George is saying. Put on this holy face on Sunday, but then you can kind of live however you want outside of that because, you're not in God's church. You're not in the building. So it's okay. That's a big issue and error that George has that needs to be corrected. Now, with this being said, we're going to see what Ruslan has to say about this, and he's going to say what we're all pretty much thinking.
There's no such thing as a perfect church. Just like there's no such thing as a
it's run by humans.
It's run by humans, right? And so like, if I wish I could find a church that has the amazing like art of the Orthodox experience with the incense and the reverence and like all of that with the we're gonna go by the word, right? But like at the end of the day, I think being a part of the body is so crucial to just your development, because that is the institution that Jesus left behind.
So Ruslan's right. There is no such thing as a perfect church. We cannot use this crutch that says, oh, because I've been church hurt, that's why I don't want to go to church anymore. And that's why I don't belong in a church. And I'm just going to wait till I find this quote unquote perfect church. That doesn't exist. And we cannot use that as a crutch. Guys, Ruslan, you guys know his past. He has been heavily affected in a dark way of being church hurt. I myself, if you don't know my past, have been church hurt in a dark way as well. But that can't be our reasoning for not finding a church, guys. There will be no such thing as a perfect church. But there are people in that body. You can find a local body. George can find one in Arizona or LA, wherever he decides to resign and live. But we can find a body there that loves Jesus, that has a respect and fear and reverence and awe towards the Creator, who preaches expository preaching, just going through verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book. And we can be faithful servants in that local body. growing and fulfilling what we see in these one another's that I'm going to read off. Love one another, honor one another, greet one another, welcome, show hospitality, have fellowship, agree with, live in harmony, be at peace, be kind, forgive, bear with one another, bear one another's burdens, comfort, care for one another, confess sins, pray for one another, encourage one another, build up one another, exhort one another, instruct, teach, and admonish, sing with one another, stir up, do good to one another, serve, wash one another's feet, wait for one another, be humble toward one another, submit, speak the truth, do not speak against, do not judge, do not provoke one another, and do not envy one another. Guys, we cannot biblically live this way if we are not plugged into the local body. I've reached out to George and seen if I could just meet up with him and have some deeper conversations about the word of the living God and just kind of lift one another up, encourage one another, and also correct one another. So, George, if you're listening to this, if you're plugging into this, and let's connect, let's have some dinner, have some lunch or something, and just kind of go through this scripture, go through your questions, and get deep with this. I'm praying for you, man. Enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the BTteam Ministry YouTube channel, as well as drop a like down below and leave a comment. I would love to hear from you and have some conversations about this. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one over here.